In this problem, we're going to implement or have the Fed implement monetary stimulus. This is an introduction to what we're going to discuss over the next 2 or 3 months, monetary policy. And it works like fiscal policy. Fiscal policy, Congress and the president cut taxes or increase government spending to push aggregate demand out so that GDP is equal to potential and unemployment falls and decreases from a high level to the natural level, the normal level, if you will. Here, the Fed is going to lower interest rates by expanding the money supply to stimulate the economy using money and low interest rates. So when interest rates are low, that encourages consumers to buy a new car, build and buy a new house, or entrepreneurs to open new businesses, or existing businesses to expand factories. And all that stuff is intended to, all that stuff theoretically pushes aggregate demand out, because aggregate demand is the total amount of spending by these kind of actors. Okay, and so instead of using government spending, the government or tax cuts, the government is asking the Federal Reserve, if you will, to lower interest rates to stimulate the economy. And we have two scenarios. We have the Keynesian model. We're going to compare the Keynesian model to the Neoclassical model. In the Neoclassical model, short and aggregate supply slopes up. In a Keynesian model, short and aggregate supply curve is flat, perfectly elastic. Okay, and they have different conclusions, different consequences. Okay, so to find the equilibrium GDP, you set the aggregate demand curve equal to the supply curve, and then you solve for Y. And I've done that for you right here. So GDP is $22.104 trillion. You take this value and you plug it into the short and aggregate supply curve, and you get a price level of 11.569 because the slope in the Keynesian model is 0. If I take this value and I plug it into aggregate demand, I'll get the same value, 11.569. Now the output gap, right? We have an output gap here, right? See that? Real GDP is less than potential. So we have an output gap and it's negative. So to calculate the output gap, this is just a review of what we've done. We've already done it, I don't know, 3 or 4 times on my open math. We're going to take what GDP is and we're going to subtract from it what GDP should be, potential. Okay, I'll take that to Excel to have Excel do the arithmetic. And the output gap is negative $1.875 billion or trillion dollars. Okay, and because we're in an output gap, we have a negative output gap called a recessionary gap. GDP is less than potential, unemployment is high. And again, unemployment being high means unemployment is greater than the natural rate. Okay, so this is where the Fed steps in. Interest rates generally fall after the Federal Reserve lowers the federal funds rate. This is the rate the Fed controls. It is the interest rate that one bank will charge another bank because that other bank needs reserves to meet its reserve requirement. So it takes out a loan from another bank, and the interest charged on that loan is the federal funds rate. Now, if inflation expectations are constant, that's a pretty big if, the real rate of interest will decrease. The real rate of interest decreases. And we'll learn about why that is in a future lecture PowerPoint. Okay, now that action increases investment expenditures in the form of new homes that people buy, or factories people expand, or new businesses that entrepreneurs open up. And because it increases investment expenditures, aggregate demand is affected. The intercept of aggregate demand was 22.4. The new intercept of aggregate demand is 23.319. The slope is unchanged. We're assuming ceteris paribus here, all else equal. So everything else, short and aggregate supply has not been affected. Potential GDP has not been affected. The only thing that's been affected is the intercept of aggregate demand. Graphically, that means aggregate demand lies higher than it did. This is what it was initially. This is what it is now as a result of the monetary policy. Okay? And you can see that GDP was too low, and now GDP is just right. And the price level did not change. Okay? So this has the same, so graphically, in the Keynesian model, this is really mathematically, graphically, no different than the tax cut or increase in government spending that we did in the Keynesian model of question 5. So real GDP does increase, right? Real GDP does increase. And we'll copy these three numbers into Excel. Okay, so we'll have the price, we'll have GDP, we'll have the price level, and then we have potential GDP, which is, we'll put over here for now. Whoop. I'll delete all this stuff. I should have probably just typed it, but my memory is not very good anymore. Okay. Okay, so the 22.104 is GDP. That right there is the price level. Okay, I probably made that too hard. And this is what it is, and this is what it was, right? Okay, so the price level doesn't change, right? The price level is 11.569 because it is not affected in the Keynesian model by the value of real GDP. So the price level is 11.569 before and after, right? So the price level doesn't change. Okay. What happened to the GDP level? Well, the GDP level is now equal to potential, right? The GDP level is now equal to potential, right? You see that? Short and aggregate supply, aggregate demand now meet at potential, and that is 23.979. And the price level on a Keynesian short and aggregate supply curve is perfectly elastic or flat. So there's no change there. So to calculate the percent change in GDP, we take what it is minus what it was, divide that difference by what it was, and multiply by 100. And we get 8.48%. And then, of course, inflation is zero in this model because the price level doesn't change along a perfectly flat, elastic, short and aggregate supply curve in the Keynesian model. Okay, so GDP increases by that percent, and the price level changes by 0%. Hit OK, and there we go. We got all these correct answers, right? So let's go ahead and graph this Keynesian model. Okay, so price level, when you screenshot this chart or graph, and then you type answers to stuff from this homework problem, you'll then print it and, of course, use your pencil to label the scenario 1, well, the before the monetary policy equilibrium and the equilibrium after the monetary policy. Okay, and the GDP level was 22.104. I'm going to just abbreviate it to 22.1. It was 22.1. The price level is 11.569. I'll abbreviate that as 11.6. Real GDP, or potential GDP, is 23.979. So I'll abbreviate that as 23.98. Oh, man. Okay, that big blob is 23.98. Okay. My pen messed up. This right here is short-run aggregate supply. This up here is long-run aggregate supply. And this is aggregate demand initial. And this is aggregate demand as a result of the monetary policy. I'll give it 2 tick. Well, make that a 2. Okay. And the reduction in interest rates caused investment expenditures to increase. It also caused consumption to increase, right? Because people are gonna buy a new car at lower interest rates. So that shifts aggregate demand outward, right? That shifts aggregate demand outward. And monetary policy is more quickly implemented because a bunch of politicians and the president take a while to agree on stuff, where you have a small committee of central planners at the FOMC, the Federal Open Market Committee, making these decisions every few weeks. Okay, so that's the effect of monetary policy in the Keynesian model. Monetary policy is not inflationary because prices don't increase. So the price level does not change. So it's constant. GDP increases and unemployment falls. So that's good, and that's good, right? So everything about monetary policy is good, right? From a Keynesian perspective. Okay, let me go ahead and erase everything. Okay, now moving on to the neoclassical critique of monetary policy. Okay, here, short and aggregate supply is not perfectly elastic. Short and aggregate supply is upward sloping, right? And to find the equilibrium, I set this equal to that, solve for GDP, and I happen to get 22.104. When I plug this value into the short aggregate supply curve, we get 11.569. When I plug this value into the aggregate demand curve, we get 11.569. Okay, so we've done that before. I'll spare you the details here. Okay, so the output gap is the difference between what real GDP is and potential. And again, we're in a recessionary gap because real GDP is less than potential. And I'm going to have Excel, again, calculate this value. And it's negative 1.875. So we're in a recessionary gap with high unemployment. Unemployment's high, considered high when it's greater than the natural unemployment rate. Okay. So, again, the Fed does exactly what it did above. It lowers interest rates by lowering the federal funds rate. Again, the federal funds rate is the interest rate a bank charges another bank when that other bank is trying to meet its reserve requirement. So if inflation expectations are constant, the real rate of interest will decrease. It decreases. Okay, and this increases investment expenditure and exports and consumption. Okay, it increases exports because when the real rate of interest decreases in the United States, foreigners don't want to buy, holding all else equal, foreigners don't want to buy our treasury debt because interest rates in the United States, real rates, are lower under the ceteris paribus than their rates because we're holding their rates constant. So they don't want to buy our treasury bonds. When they don't want to buy our treasury bonds, they have to use dollars to buy those treasury bonds. So they demand fewer dollars. And that causes prices of goods that we export to other nations to fall. So lower prices of American goods increases the amount we export. So that's why exports increase. And consumption also increases because people are going to go out and buy that new car when interest rates fall, right? That's the thinking. Okay. Suppose this monetary policy results in what? A new intercept of aggregate demand, right? So go from the original aggregate demand curve where we had a recessionary gap to the new aggregate demand curve, right? Everything else is constant, right? Under ceteris paribus. The slope of aggregate demand, constant. Short and aggregate supply curve doesn't change. Potential GDP doesn't change. The only thing that's changing is this value. And that value is increased from 22.4 to 24.192 because of more investment, more exports, and more consumption from consumers at the lower interest rates. Okay, so we know that real GDP increases up along the short and aggregate supply curve, and so too does price level. Okay, in the Keynesian model, where short and aggregate supply curve was perfectly elastic or flat, that's not the case here. Short and aggregate supply slopes up. So let's go ahead and label the graph. So again, whoops, I don't want to do red there. The vertical axis is the price level. The horizontal axis is real GDP. Long run aggregate supply is the vertical line. Short and aggregate supply curve slopes up in the Neoclassical model. Aggregate demand initials down here. The GDP and price level initially are determined at the intersection of short and aggregate supply and aggregate demand. And we're in an inflationary or a recessionary gap. We have an negative output gap, which is a recessionary gap. And then this is the new aggregate demand curve that results from the decrease in interest rates that caused three things: greater investment expenditures, greater exports, and more consumption. People buying new homes, entrepreneurs starting new businesses, needing capital to do that. Existing businesses expanding operations, factories, exports from a reduced demand for dollars because foreigners don't want to buy our treasuries. They want to buy other treasuries, so they switch from our treasuries to somebody else's. That lowers the demand for dollars, which lowers our export prices, which boost exports, quantity of our exports. And then lower interest rates induce people to use their credit cards or buy new cars. So that shifts aggregate demand outward. Okay? The price level initially was 11.569. I'll call it 11.6. The GDP level was initially 22.104, 22.1. Okay, and then we have the new equilibrium where we got GDP equal to potential, right? And we got a higher price level, right? Prices went up and GDP went up. So price level increased, GDP increased, and unemployment decreased. And GDP increased to 23.979, the potential level, right? We'll call it 23.98. Now in your homework, you're going to need to calculate the new price level. So all you do is you plug this 23.98 into here. That's all you do. 23.98 into that equation. We'll go ahead and do it in Excel. Okay, potential 23.979. The new GDP level is that. That's the new GDP level. We plug this new GDP level into the aggregate demand curve, the new aggregate demand curve, and we get a price level of 12.442. Right? This is the new price level. This is what it is now, right? Okay, GDP is now equal to potential, and when you plug that new GDP level into the new aggregate demand curve, you get 12.4429 or 12.44, right? So let's go back here. So the new price level is 12.44. Okay, so that's a fully graphed curve that you'll need to do for your memo. Okay, so let me erase all that. Real GDP did increase, right? We need what the GDP was. GDP was 22.104. So GDP was 22.104. The price level was 11.569. Right? At the new equilibrium, GDP is equal to potential. Right? At the new equilibrium, right here, where short aggregate supply crosses new aggregate demand, the new GDP level is potential, which is 23.979. Right? We plug that into the new aggregate demand curve with an intercept of 24.192. So this is the new aggregate demand curve. That's the new level of GDP, and this is the new price level. So let's calculate the economic growth rate. The economic growth rate is what GDP is minus what GDP was. Divide that difference by what GDP was. Times that by 100 to convert it to a percent. And we get a small percent change in GDP. We do the same thing for the price level. The price level is 12.44. Subtract from that what it was, 11.569. Divide that difference by what it was, 11.569. Multiply that by 100. Whoops, I need to do that by 100. I gotta go fix that up here. Multiply that by 100, right? not 10 by 100 to turn it to a percent. So it's a little higher, a lot higher, 8.48. So GDP increases by 8.48%. And the price level increases by 7.55%. So the Neoclassical model says, yeah, if you want to do this with monetary policy, there is a cost. We're going to pay higher prices collectively. And I hit enter and I get all the correct answers. So in review, there is no inflation in the Keynesian model. Monetary policy is good, lowers unemployment, increases GDP, and does not affect the prices that people pay. And it doesn't increase the fiscal budget balance or deficit. In the Neoclassical model, the fiscal budget remains balanced, unemployment falls, real GDP increases, but there is a cost in the form of the fact that we all pay generally higher prices. Okay? And then you'll have to do this for your homework memo 1, right? Down here at the bottom. So answer these questions. So screenshot the 2 graphs, label them completely as I showed you how to do that. Type in your answers down here, print it off, and then wait to label it until after you print it off, because you don't want to print it, or you don't want to label it with, Word. You want to label it with a writing pen.